My name's Steve Wade. I'm an independent cloud native consultant and trainer. Half of this talk was going to be a little bit of Tom's and a little bit of Daniel's kind of wrapped into one. So I kind of scrapped the middle section of this talk. And now it's really about things that tech community don't talk about enough. So we're going to talk about some difficult subject matter, some things that are close to my heart from what I've experienced in the last 35 years on this planet. And how you can take the lessons learned from playing professional soccer or football to working with tech teams in industry, right? And there's a lot of crossovers and more crossovers than you probably think. There's a bunch of obvious ones and there's a bunch of less obvious ones. So what I want to start with is a question. So I want to make this as interactive as possible. So if you scan this QR code, you're going to get the first question, which is going to be, I'll let you all take a picture. So the first question is, what's the most important trait of being a good member of a team? Right, and a lot of you are probably going to say the same answer, like communication, which, yeah, I would agree with that. But I think there's some other things that are actually more important than just good communication. And during this talk, we're going to cover a bunch of them. And then at the end, I'm going to tell you the one that I personally think is the most important, the one that doesn't get talked that much about. It's on the list, which is great. So to start with, I'm going to get this out of the way. I support Man United, this version of Man United, not this version of Man United. We'll just skip what the current setup is like. So people that know me probably expect me to tweet a lot about Kubernetes and GitOps and like using different cloud native technologies. And then they see stuff like this and people are like, well, this is why you like kind of tweet this random nonsense that I don't really understand. So there's no YAML, there's no JSON in this presentation. I'm almost certain that Daniel's going to do that in his next talk, so I didn't want to kind of bore you with a bunch of YAML. I'll let Daniel do that because he's better at it than I am. So what are we going to cover? We're going to cover my story, so we're going to go back to when I was a kid, the lessons that I've learned and the journey that I've been on as a professional footballer until the age of 18. Then the transition, right? So the transition from being a professional footballer to doing something completely different, standing on stage like this, talking to people, and what are the crossovers between the two fields that I've been standing in. We'll talk a little bit about how I discovered Kubernetes and then some kind of key takeaways and some thoughts that I want you to go away with. So, another question is, not this one. What's the first computer you remember using? I'm hoping that we get a good range of answers. Someone please put like a MacBook Pro M3.
Sorry, I can't do it.
You can't do it? Now we're good. Wow, some good answers. So I'm going to come back to this because this was a key moment in my life that kind of changed and allowed me to be able to pivot from what I was doing to what I'm doing now. So we'll come back to that. So my journey. So at 4 years old, I got signed to play an academy, a professional academy for a Premier League team. They're currently not a Premier League team anymore, based down south. So I was living the dream, right? I'm like a 4-year-old kid playing with all my friends, playing football. I'm going to be the next Lionel Messi. I'm going to be on £1 billion a week, right? I don't have any worries to worry about. Everything's going to be great. I'm the cool kid at school, right? Everyone's like, oh, sweet, Steve plays football. Like, that's really cool. Like, can you come and join the school team? Well, no, I actually couldn't, because as part of the academy, you can't actually play for the school team. And then this happened. So at the age of 18, I got a critical knee injury that basically writ off my whole entire career. So pretty graphic, but I could spin this kneecap both ways around my leg. I blew my ACL out and I tore my medial and lateral ligaments. This was me for about 18 months. I couldn't weight bear, I couldn't do anything. I basically relied on my parents to look after me, right? At this point, I'm thinking to myself, like, what do I do, right? And I spiral into depression, right? And this is a topic of, like, a sensitive topic area, but I think it's one that's really important, right? When you realize your friends aren't really your real friends, like, because what you gave them when you were 18, you can't give them anymore, right? You can't give them the life that they wanted. You feel like your life's over, right? The passion that you had for many, many years and the thing that you thought you were going to do for the rest of your life is just gone, vanished. So how do we fix this problem, right? And it's really about refocusing. We need to put that time and energy that we had on the football field, doing training. You know, as an example, I was getting up at 6 a.m. I was in the swimming pool. I would swim 64 lengths. I'd get up, I'd go home, have a shower, eat breakfast. I'd do my homework on the way to school because after school I had to go and train, right? So my life was like a hamster wheel, but it was a professional sport hamster wheel. And after the professional sport hamster wheel, we've now got to go to the technical hamster wheel and the business hamster wheel, right? So we just get off of one hamster wheel and go to another one. So what lessons can I take from 14 years of playing football? And I think the first obvious one is teamwork, right? The team only succeeds when the core group of players wins or loses, right? The striker that scores the goal is not the one that actually should get all the praise, right? It's all of the intricate passes that have happened to get to the end destination. It's the journey that's really important. It's not the destination at the end. We can clap and cheer about the destination, but we need to also celebrate the journey. And how does that kind of translate into a technical or business aspect? Well, that's really about project management. How do we manage the team? How do we get the best use of our resources? Then we can talk about strategic planning. So we can see here that we're trying to line up a formation of how we're going to play against a specific team. So how do we translate that? Well, that's really about, you know, agile sprint planning. What players or what work are we going to give certain team members this sprint, and what are we looking for in the next sprint? So if we take the next sprint as the second half, what kind of substitutions and changes are we going to make? Then we've got this kind of agile and adaptability, right? So you, as a footballer, I played in midfield, which is kind of the middle of the football pitch. But sometimes I had to play in defense and sometimes I had to play striker, right? And I have to be able to adapt to those different positions. And that's really kind of where the agile methodology comes in, right? We need to be able to approach software in a collaborative and adaptable way, because not every piece of software that we build is going to look the same, right? I've worked at a number of different banks and they're doing banking completely differently. And we need to be able to adapt when we talk to customers and kind of meet them in the middle, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Then we've got performing under pressure. This actually isn't me, but this is the World Cup where they were going to make their way to the final and they unfortunately didn't. But we need to be able to perform under pressure, right? Professional sport is, you know, highly competitive. It's basically a business, right? You're just a cog in a machine, essentially. And how do we kind of translate this across to the technical or business aspects is really around incident response. How do we handle ourselves under pressure? The best way for us to handle ourselves under pressure when we have an incident is to plan what happens when we have an incident, right? So get used to this process and patterns of play, right? We talked about patterns of play as a professional footballer. We have patterns of play when there's incidents that we have to deal with. Or product launches, right? What's the order of execution for us to launch this product to production? It really comes down to good planning. Resilience and perseverance. So you get injured playing football a lot, right? I busted my knee, I busted my leg, I busted my shoulder. But we have to build resilience into these systems. to be able to expect failure, right? You can't have a football team of just 11 players. There's a reason why there's 22 or 24 players. It's because people are going to get injured, right? Systems are going to fail. We need to be able to expect failure. We don't want to, think about it after it happens. We want to build that into our solutions. So we need to have innovative solutions for us to be able to kind of handle resilience. And then leadership, which is the obvious one. He's a terrible captain for anyone that actually likes football, but let's kind of skip over that. Maguire, not Rice. Rice is actually pretty good. So leadership really is around, technical leadership. And what do we mean by leadership? So really, you have one captain, right? And you have one tech lead within your team. But the captain doesn't really succeed unless there's other leaders that are driving the team forward. He or she can drive the team forward and be the kind of voice or champion at the front. But if the people behind aren't helping him, then nothing's going to succeed. So you can have one captain in a team, but if you don't have everybody singing from the same hymn sheet, you're never going to innovate and you're never going to succeed the way you want to be able to succeed. As well as that, a captain's job is to mentor others, right? He is eventually going to leave and get replaced by somebody else. So what is the culture that's inbuilt in the team so that when he moves on, that culture still exists, right? And it's exactly the same when we're talking about product teams and we're talking about like platform engineering teams where I've spent a lot of my time. It's really, how do I make sure the person that replaces me keeps the culture that we've built going? Mental stamina. I don't know why I keep having him on here, but anyway. Mental stamina is, obviously in football you need a lot of mental stamina. You get injured, you get dropped. Sometimes you're playing, sometimes you're not playing at all for 4 weeks. If you translate that into kind of a sprint, sometimes you're doing the boring work that no one really actually wants to do, and the same people are doing the innovative work. And how do you kind of handle that? And you as an individual need to be able to work together within the team to make sure that you distribute the workload equally amongst the members of the team. So that's really about giving important work to the less, senior members of the team, but building in that ability so that you can allow the more senior members of the team to spend time with those junior members and kind of bring them up to the level that we want everybody to be at. Wax lyrical about him, but that's a different story. So someone I saw before stated communication is really important. It's incredibly important, right? When we talk about, specifically in industry, we're talking about interdepartmental communication, right? How does HR work with your team to help you make sure that you hire the right people? Or what's the documentation and reporting like between product teams that are sharing applications and API versions, et cetera, et cetera? It's the same on the football field, right? One of the exercises that we used to do when we were playing football is we tried to play football in silence. You can't do it. It's literally impossible, right? And you can't build a business if different teams don't talk to each other. That's where the problems start to happen. And you can't just share documentation. Documentation's a good start, but you need to be able to be collaborative and extrovert and actually start to have those conversations. This to me is the most important one. Right, we need to be empathetic. And what does it mean to be empathetic? What it means to be empathetic is to understand people's roles, right? And understand and recognize the emotional state of those contributions from all the different players in your whole entire company, or even smaller than that, within your team. And supporting those kind of juniors or maybe even interns. And what is the journey from taking them from a junior to a senior, and how do we match and track that progress over time? And then it's really about inclusive leadership. So kind of going back to a previous slide there, it's making sure that we understand how the juniors are feeling and the work that we're giving them and how it's impacting their career growth. And leadership, when I was a captain playing football, was really about giving and understanding the role of people that are on the substitute bench, right? So what is their role? Or people that are in the reserve team, what's their role? Because they need to see a pathway, right, to get to playing professional football. And it's very similar when you're at an enterprise organization. The person needs to see a pathway for success. And we need to make sure that those pathways are obvious and clear to everybody. So that's enough about football. If any of you don't like football, that's the only football bit you're going to see. So now it's kind of time to embrace a new type of field. So like I'm 18, I play professional football, all of a sudden career over, right? And by over, I mean, I'm sitting in the boardroom. They not physically, but kind of emotionally ripped up the contract in front of my face and basically said, see you later, right? We're not going to give you any help, any support, nothing. You're basically on your own. There's a very good documentary on BBC that talks about this exact problem. So you're on your own. Like, what do I do? What options do I have available to me? So at the academy, one of the things they do is they take you you go to football school. And by football school, they get ex-players that talk about all of the bad things that, you know, people are in the media, all the footballers in the media kind of about. But they also say to you, you need to have a life after football, right? Football's got a period of time between the age of probably, if you're good, like 16 to maybe like 30 and a bit. So what are you going to do after that? And the obvious ones were, you know, you're going to be a coach, or you're going to go into commentating, or you're going to be on the TV pretending that you know absolutely everything about football when you clearly don't. They're the options that you have. I was like, I don't really want to do any of them. Then I found this thing. So my dad worked in IT, and I'd go home from football training and he'd be on the computer, and kind of 8-year-old me over here, he's like really intrigued about what this box is, because I don't spend any time at a box. I'm just in a car or going to school or running around a football field like some kind of lunatic. And then I see something that looks like this, and I'm like, what is that? Like, none of that makes any sense. Like, I'm used to reading English at school, and you're showing me kind of all this gobbledygook. So the thing that really kind of took it home to me was when you're writing code and you have like an uppercase letter, a couple of lowercase letters, and then another uppercase letter combined, like camel case. I was like, Dad, this isn't English. Like, where's the space? Like, I'm used to reading things with spaces. Why do you have really, really long method names? So then this happened, and the long story short is that I spent all of my time trying to get my dad to explain to me what really basic concepts are. So I'm talking like while loops, if loops, for loops, et cetera, et cetera. And then this became the rabbit hole. This was the itch that I scratched, because I was like, well, he's pretty successful in what he's doing, and like we have a nice house and we go on some nice holidays, so maybe this is the get out of jail free card. So it's relentless studying, right? I was relentless in the work that I was doing as a professional footballer because I really want to make it. So getting up at 6 a.m. to go to the swimming pool, I wasn't getting up at 6 a.m. to go to the swimming pool. I was getting up at 6 a.m. to, unfortunately, trying to work out what PHP was, and I wasted my time, but that's a different story. But really, it was really about embracing different technologies in different parts of the industry to really understand and ascertain what I really wanted to do. And this is a quote that I believe in, and it got instilled into us when we were playing professional football. But hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard, right? I just worked hard, like every night, every morning, learning different things. I had to get a way out. I didn't want to be in football anymore. I wasn't interested in it. I'd watch it occasionally, but I had to put my passion somewhere else. Then this thing kind of happened. These are actually containers, but it doesn't really work very well on here. So rolling forward probably like 75 years in technical term, I was on site at a client, and they had probably like 20 or 25 different applications. They're all running different versions. This team is like 5 people, and they have to support absolutely like every single one of them. And you can't run 2 versions of like application A and application B because you can't install different dependencies. You can only have one dependency on your machine at the same time. So everything was taking about 10, 20, 30 times longer than it needed to be. And then from a business perspective, the business are like, well, what is your team doing? Like, you're taking absolutely ages to like build something trivial. So I was like, there must be some better, more obvious solution that was available. And lo and behold, a friend of mine worked at a startup. That startup got acquired by Docker. And he was like, well, just try this container thing. Like, it's going to take off. It's going to be the next big thing. Me, naively stupid me, is like, yeah, let's just do it. What the hell? Like, what's the worst I can do? Then in 2016, I wrote this tweet. I can't even remember what it said now. I think it said something like, can somebody explain to me what Kubernetes is? Because it seems way more complicated than Swarm, and Swarm I can actually explain to non-technical people. And then Kelsey said, oh, I'll jump on a Zoom with you and I'll kind of explain it to you. And he explained it as a bowl of multiple bowls of fruit. And you're the person that kind of puts your hand in the fruit and says, do you want an apple next to the banana or do you want the banana next to the peach? And I was like, okay, sounds pretty trivial. I can probably go into an organization and explain exactly what Kubernetes is. So then what we decided is that in 2016, after I spoke to Kelsey, and I mean literally the next day, this was the release of Kubernetes that was currently available. This was the latest one, so 1.2. So for any of you that are familiar with Kubernetes, deployments wasn't even a thing at that time. So what did naive CV-driven development Steve do? Well, he just went straight to production. I'm going to cut out everybody else. I'm a consultant. Just trust me. This thing will work. Well, lo and behold, it didn't. This is like kind of me walking out the building after it all kind of blew up. I did go back the next day, but there were a lot of lessons that I learned, and something that I'm a big believer in is you've just got to try, right? Try, and you'll eventually succeed. And you only really learn when you're deep in the weeds of the technology, right? It looks really cool from the outside, but I'm sure Daniel's going to go into a lot more depth of Kubernetes, and it's extremely complicated, but it's extremely powerful. But you only really get to understand what power it has when you really get in the weeds. And I'm not going to steal your thunder there. So kind of roll on 75 years later at multiple different companies, and now I'm on stage at SecurityCon giving a workshop on kind of Kubernetes security. So I've gone from being on stage, accepting awards, playing professional football, all of the depression, all of that kind of anxiety and worry about what I was going to do next. And now I'm on stage giving a talk about, cluster security. So from a stage at an awards to now on a stage helping other people, right? And why I love being a consultant is because I like to learn things, and I also like to make sure that the things that are easy, everybody should know how to do, right? And anyone that came to my talk yesterday, I kind of battered it on about this. We need to make Kubernetes boring, and we need to get rid of all of the things that everybody's doing and actually get to the real business value, right? We can't keep working out how to do observability and how to do runtime detection and all this kind of stuff. The CNCF haven't actually helped with that, and it's being recorded, so I'm going to be careful what I say. But there's a proliferation of tools, and the landscape, if you've ever gone and looked at it, you actually have to zoom out to see all of the applications that you have available to you. This is me now. So I started as a developer. I then went to a platform engineer, and then I checked out this thing called GitOps, and now this is where I spend kind of all of my time. So GitOps is really how you deploy workloads and manage configuration of your Kubernetes cluster. So yeah, the learning curve was steep. We had to overcome challenges like feeling overwhelmed, this Kubernetes thing, and even just tech in general was completely overwhelming. There's hundreds and hundreds of books. Complex concepts. Leverage resources, right? We've got online learning, we've got books and guides, we've got YouTube channels, we've got podcasts. Just kind of embrace it and really kind of dig into it. Leverage the community. So I've been to probably every KubeCon in Europe and North America since London. And I genuinely believe if I didn't go to this, I wouldn't be on stage now talking about what I've been doing. This community is massive. When I was in London, it was probably about 10 or 15 people. I went to Paris a couple of weeks ago, it's 13,000. And it was 13,000 people in Paris. Yeah, overwhelming. But it was practitioners. It wasn't just people trying to sell you tools. It was people talking about what they've done and what they've built on Kubernetes. Blog about it, right? Bad self-promotion link at the bottom there in small. I blogged about absolutely everything that I learned, right? Because there's no point in everybody learning the same thing, right? We can all learn from each other, so let's just blog about it. It takes a little bit of time. Probably the English isn't great, but the general gist of working out how we're going to achieve something is there. Kind of what are the key takeaways? Well, really, the first one is the significance of community and just talking to other people, right? We have to get and have the ability to be able to talk to others. We're all here in this meetup. Let's talk to each other. Let's collaborate. Let's learn from each other. The more we learn and the more we network, the more everything becomes a lot easier. lifelong learning, right? The pace of change is absolutely ridiculous, right? Just in the cloud native ecosystem, there's a new tool that's graduated in the CNCF like every other day, and it's really about which ones do you pick and choose. So for me, it's focus on one area and become that kind of T-shaped person that everybody talks about. Have a wide understanding of a large majority of the tool stack, but really kind of specialize in one. And then resilience, right? Overcoming setbacks. You have setbacks in life, you have setbacks within your company. And what's that adaptability, and how do you become an adaptable person? And really, it's getting outside your comfort zone, right? Get comfortable being uncomfortable. Do the things that you don't want to do. No one wants to do tech debt and do the boring stuff. Just do it. Like, you might actually find a better way of, or a more intuitive and faster way of being able to leverage or fix the problem. For example, this is like an old football thing, but every morning I kind of jump in an ice bath for 3 minutes and it's like 4 degrees, and it's the most uncomfortable thing I'll do every day. But it sets me up for the day, because if I can do the hardest thing in the morning, anything at work becomes really, really easy, right? It's not as bad as jumping in an ice bath for 3 minutes. So I want to leave you with a couple of quotes. I'm a huge fan of Stephen Bartlett. I know that kind of raises a couple of eyebrows, as people do like it and people don't like it. But I think this is a really important one, right? We should disagree less and understand more. And it's really about meeting people in the middle, understanding their pain points and talking to them and collaborating with them and showing empathy. I think empathy is the most important thing. We have a lot, I'm guilty of this myself. We have, as senior members, we're like, oh, we've done this 100 times. There's no other, this is the way to do it. I've done it before. You've got to listen to the people that have never done it before and come up with a more intuitive, maybe, way of doing it. And then this is a long ramble, but really it's about, if you don't take any risks, you're not going to get any reward, ever, in life, in technology, in engineering. And kind of finally, I want to leave you with, if I can do it, you can do it, and anybody can do it, right? I thought my life was completely over at the age of 18, like totally and utterly over. And now I'm doing something that I'm extremely passionate about, and I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't go back to football. Thank you very much.